Hello everyone, and welcome to this Spotlight special. This is one of our Spotlight sessions, but rather than looking at a number of different books on a particular theme, I'm going to be looking at just one book today, and that's because this is a recent donation to the library, which is absolutely fantastic. It's really incredible, and I really want to share it with everyone and let you know about it. So we recently received an email from a gentleman named Julian Hill, who had a book in his possession that had passed down to him through his family. He's not sure how, why or when it came into his family, but he has acquired it. And in searching online, he found us and he felt that we were the appropriate repository for the book, so he offered to donate it to us. And this is the book as it turned out when it arrived. So you can see, if I open it up, that what it is a handwritten journal of weather recordings which were taken at Bromley House Library in the late 1830s and early 1840s. So this journal includes the date, it includes the barometric pressure recordings, the temperature, the wind speed and direction, and some general comments on the weather. And these recordings were taken from September 1838 up until the end of 1841. And these particular types of recordings, you could see that they were taken 2 or 3 times on each day. These continue throughout that period, but at various other times, extra additional recordings were also taken. So in May 1839, the time of sunrise was added into the journal. In July 1839, an extra column was added, which is headed pluviometer, which is a machine for recording the amount of rainfall that has been taken in since it was last emptied. And in August 1839, additional columns were added so that there was an internal and external thermometer being used, so temperatures inside the building as well as outside the building, and also a column for the cloud type. So if I open it to that page and show you all of those recordings, here we are. So August 1839, we've got the date still, and then the barometric pressure at 10 a.m, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. We have the attached thermometer and the external thermometer. We have the wind speed and direction. We have the pluviometer, so this is the amount of rainfall in inches since the last time it was measured. And we have the cloud types as described. The cloud column has then been crossed through, and I'm not quite sure why, but we have the cloud types and then the remarks as we'd had previously. And then in 1840, there were some more columns added, some additional information, which I'll come back to towards the end of this little talk. So in the back of the book, we then also have a graph with some additional calculations, the range of the mercury, so the temperatures for 1839, and the rainfall as well. And then there are some more calculations, a separate sheet which looks at how you do the calculations, and there are some sketches of cloud types as well in here. Very, very pale. I don't know whether the camera will pick them up. We have pencil sketches of cloud types too. So all told, this book is absolutely fantastic. Each of the 3 years in it is started with a title page, and the title pages are also hand drawn, and each title page is different. So the first title page for 1838 is here. Meteorological Register number 1. We don't think there was a number 2, unfortunately, because it stopped in the middle of this book at the end of 1841. Bromley House Subscription Library. And then for 1839 onwards, Nottingham, Meteorological Journal, kept at Bromley House, 1839. And from 1839 onwards, we also have the name of the person who's been taking the readings, R.N. Harris. And this is the same in the subsequent years as well. Although I'm going to open it to each of these pages because the designs of the title pages are really rather lovely. Kept at Bromley House by R.N. Harris, 1840. And then the last one, 1841, it's gone very much all out for the design of this one. Meteorological Journal, kept at Bromley House, R.N. Harris, 1841. So these are quite artistic as well as being a really interesting series of recordings. So we have the name R.N. Harris. And looking in our archives and previous research that people have done on our archives, we can discover that there was a porter at the library who was employed around this time, whose name was Richard Harris. So Richard Harris was taken on in the library as a porter in January 1837, and we know that he was definitely still here in May 1841 because he's mentioned in the minutes of the council meetings then, mentioned as Harris the porter. We don't know when he finished working here, but he was certainly here for most of the period when this journal was being taken. So he therefore, as the library porter, would have been on site, would have been here most days, and would have therefore been available to take the readings in order to make the journal. So it therefore seems likely that Harris the porter is the R.N. Harris, Richard Harris, who took these recordings and created this journal. And at this time, obviously, there was a very high level of interest in scientific matters across Europe, really, throughout the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So the Enlightenment period, the interest in science and reason. And it's clear that this was reflected here at Bromley House. So the wind direction dial that we have behind the counter was installed in the 1820s. Our meridian line was put in 1827, and the heliochronometer in the garden was installed in 1836. And it's also clear from our old visitors book that some of the great names of science of the time did come to Bromley House. So for instance, we have Michael Faraday's signature in the book from 1835. So this journal seems a fairly likely thing for us to have, something that was likely to have happened at a place where people were meeting and were discussing current ideas. It doesn't seem unsurprising that someone was recording this sort of information and keeping it here at Bromley House. Now, in 1840, the journal starts to include extra columns, as I've mentioned. So one of those columns, if you want to just zoom in here, is, ooh. You give people a headache. But yeah, so this column here is the predictions of J.R. Hind. Now, I've done a bit of research onto J.R. Hind as well, and this is, I believe, John Russell Hind, who was born in Nottingham in 1823. Now, he did publish an atmospheric almanac for the years 1839 and 1840. And again, from our records and previous research that's been done, we know that he donated a copy of that to Bromley House Library in 1840. So this atmospheric almanac would have been basically weather predictions for the years for 1839 and 1840. And therefore it seems likely that this book was the place where Harris got the predictions of the weather from J.R. Hind, which he's included in his columns from 1840. So likely that he was putting down what the expected weather was, maybe so that it could be compared to the actual readings that he was taking. Now, Hind was clearly very clever and a very talented scientist. In that same year, 1840, at the age of just 17, he went to London to train as an engineer, but very quickly got taken on a junior role at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. And he went on to become a very distinguished astronomer and have a very distinguished career in that area of science. However, something else interesting about this journal. So at the same time as Harris added in Hind's weather predictions, he also added in extra columns for astrological data in the book. Now, from the beginning of the journal, the days of the week have been marked by their astrological symbols. Astrological symbols. So I've printed those out just because they were something that I wasn't aware of before. But Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. These are the symbols that Harris has used to denote which day of the week he's talking about for each of these days in the journal. However, from 1840, he adds in these extra columns as well. So these columns are headed mutual aspects and lunar aspects. And both mutual aspects and lunar aspects are astrological terms referring to the positions of celestial bodies at the time. Now, in this period, in the 1830s, this was not maybe as surprising as it might seem to us now. There was still a debate at this time about whether the planets and the positioning of the planets could influence things like the weather. And also, to many people, particularly in the general public, trying to predict the weather was seen as almost as arcane as trying to predict life events. So there was little knowledge of the actual science behind it, and meteorology was still a very young science. It was still finding its feet and working out which scientific methods were actually accurate and worked for this sort of prediction. So at this time, there was a debate amongst learned people about whether astrology did have an influence on predicting the weather. So this sort of information here was not maybe, as I say, as surprising to people in the 1830s as we would find it today. However, there is some surviving correspondence from J.R. Hind, whose predictions have been included in here, and I found this quoted in an article from the History of Science from 1999, an article by Catherine Anderson. So in 1841, Hind was writing to agree to subscribe to the Proceedings of the Meteorological Society, which was a fairly new organisation at that time. And he included in his letter, "I venture to express a hope that the supposed influences of the planets will not be investigated in the work. If it is, I hesitate not to say, scientific men will not support it. Let it be entirely given over to observations and research and touch at present upon no theory whatever. I am sure you must well know that, at the present day, to be a supporter of astral influences is sufficient to stamp a man as having no science but merely a few wild ideas." So that, I think, is a fantastic quote, and it does make one wonder what Hind would have thought of having his scientific weather predictions placed in the journal next to the astrological symbols for the same date. But this is a really interesting snapshot of this point in time when meteorology as a discipline was establishing its presence and its processes and also establishing its scientific reputation. So this journal is absolutely fantastic, absolutely key new acquisition for the collection. The condition of the journal is not great. You can see it's been bound with this paper, marbled paper cover, and then it's half binding in maroon leather, but it's lost its spine completely and some of the sewing is becoming quite loose. So I've spoken to our bookbinder, and I'm hoping to get this not rebound, but stabilised. He's talked about the possibility of putting on a new spine, but making it in keeping with the condition of the current condition of the book. So wanting to keep this evidence of the life of the book whilst also making it stable and easy to read. And in addition to that, we're also hoping to digitise it. So we have a scanner, we will scan the pages and hopefully you can make a digital copy of this book so that the data, the information that's included within it is easily available and can be accessed by people who want this personal on-the-spot recording of all the weather conditions in Nottingham in this period, 1838 to 1841.